Do you need some help with your RDP tables? Can't quite get your head around it? Keep watching this video and I'll show you the easy way. Hi, I'm Jim, scuba diving instructor and co-host at the Dive Line podcast. Welcome to the first in a series of how-to videos. This one is all about how to use the RDP easily. Before we look at the RDP, and if this is your first time with us, please consider subscribing. This is the best way to check out all our videos that we've already uploaded. But also consider ringing the bell, that way you can get new content as it's released. Some of that new content will be our new how-to videos, looking at things like underwater compass use and how to deploy an SMB. This is just a quick basic introduction to the RDP tables, just so you can get your head around it. On the cards themselves, there's a lot of useful information, and I'll go through that at the end of this video. So why do we need to know our RDP tables? Well, when we go diving, we absorb nitrogen, and we need to know how much of that nitrogen is in our system. Let's look at some of the basics. The RDP table is split into 4 sections. We have number 1, depth. If you're a newly qualified open water diver, you can dive to a maximum of 18 meters, shown here. Number 2 is time. This is the amount of time that you can spend underwater at that depth. Number 3 is surface interval. This is the amount of time that you spend on the surface between 2 dives. And number 4, most importantly, is pressure group. This is denoted by letters. You need to know the pressure group because you need to know how much nitrogen is in your body, which has been left over from your last dive. This is called residual nitrogen. When we go under the water, our body starts to absorb or soak up more of the nitrogen from our gas tank. As a new diver, if you went to your maximum depth of 18 meters along the top and then stayed under the water for 30 minutes, you can see that you would soak up K amounts of nitrogen. So our pressure group after that first dive would be K. Let's say we spent 45 minutes on our surface interval. This is the amount of time between the 2 dives, remember. So if you read along from left to right on that K line, you'll find 45 minutes and then read down. This will give you pressure group E. So this is still residual nitrogen that's in our system, but it is reduced from when we first got out. Dive number 1, we went to a depth of 18 meters for a bottom time of 30 minutes. This gave us pressure group K. After a surface interval of 45 minutes, we ended up in pressure group E. Pressure group E means that we still have residual nitrogen in our bodies, in our systems. That's okay if we've done 1 dive. If we're doing more than 1 dive, we need to account for that residual nitrogen. So how do we do that? The first thing we do, flip over the RDP table to the other side. On this side of the RDP table, we basically have 3 sections. At the top, we have pressure group at end of surface interval, and we know ours was E after our first dive. Number 2, down the left-hand side, we have our depths. This is how deep you'll be going on your next dive. Then section 3, the residual nitrogen times in white, in the white boxes, and the maximum dive time in the blue box, which should not be exceeded. So let's look at that a little bit closer. We finished our first dive on pressure group K, and after a surface interval of 45 minutes, we ended up with pressure group E. So this is where we start our next dive, at pressure group E. Now if we look down the left-hand side, and let's say we did exactly the same dive again, we need to go to 18 meters. So if we look there, we can see 18 meters, and read along that 18 meter line from left to right until you get to E, and you'll see 2 boxes. One is a white box and one is a blue box. In the white box is a figure of 18. This is 18 minutes of residual nitrogen that's still in your system that needs to be accounted for and added to the next dive. In the blue box is 38 minutes. This is the maximum dive time allowed when added to the 18 minutes residual nitrogen in the white box. That gives a maximum dive time of 56 minutes, and this shouldn't be exceeded. We need to add this 18 minutes residual nitrogen to our actual dive time of 30 minutes to give us a total time of 48 minutes. We need to apply this to dive number 2. So we need to really start right back at the beginning. If we look at the first page of the RDP and go through the same process as we did right at the beginning. Let's choose our 18 meters, and now we need to look for 48 minutes. Even though the actual dive time is 30 minutes, we've added our 18, so it's 48 minutes in total. So if we head down the list to 48, and we can see that we are now in pressure group S. As you can see, although that was exactly the same dive as our first one, because we had residual nitrogen in our systems, you can see that we've jumped 8 places higher on the pressure group. We are now in pressure group S. Dive 2, we went to 18 meters again for another 30 minutes. So our residual of 18 minutes plus our actual of 30 minutes gave us a total of 48 minutes, and this put us in pressure group S. If you were doing a third dive for the day, which is very common, you would repeat the steps we'd done previously. So let's repeat those steps now. Follow that S line along into the surface interval times from left to right until you get to 1 hour. As you can see, there are 2 times in the boxes. In the one we're looking for, it says 57 minutes and 1 hour and 3 minutes, while our 1 hour falls in between those 2 times. If we follow that line down to the bottom, it puts us in pressure group G. So let's turn our RDP over again to side 2, and if we look at 12 meters this time, because we don't want to dive so deep, and follow that along from the left hand side across to pressure group G, we can see in the white box there, the residual nitrogen, we need to allow 35 minutes to our next dive. And let's say we were going to do another 30-minute dive. We need to add those together. Remember the RAT, so residual is 35 minutes, the actual is 30 minutes, so the total will be 65 minutes. So if we turn our RDP back over to page 1, looking at the top, at the depth, so 12 meters, we need to follow that down to 65 minutes. 65 minutes isn't there, so we go the next one up, which is 66 minutes. And this puts us on pressure group O. Let's just quickly show these 3 dives using the log sheets that you'll find in your logbook. Dive number 1, we went to a depth of 18 meters for a bottom time of 30 minutes. This gave us pressure group K. After a surface interval of 45 minutes, we ended up in pressure group E, and we had residual nitrogen of 18 minutes. Dive 2, we went to 18 meters again for another 30 minutes. So our residual of 18 minutes plus our actual of 30 minutes gave us a total of 48 minutes, and this put us in pressure group S. We then had a surface interval of 1 hour, and this put us in a pressure group of G. Pressure group G meant that we had 35 minutes of residual nitrogen in our bodies that had to be added to dive number 3. Dive number 3, we went to a depth of 12 meters, and our bottom time was 30 minutes. So residual of 35, an actual dive time of 30, so that gives us a total bottom time of 65 minutes. This put us in pressure group O. Okay, so we've looked at 3 dives there and found the pressure groups for them, and we've logged them as well. Just for a bit of fun, why don't you try and work out the pressure groups for these 2 dives? See how you get on, and I'll give you the answers to these pressure groups at the end of this video. Okay, dive number 1. Find the pressure group at the end of this dive. We're going to go to a depth of 20 meters for 35 minutes. So your pressure group is, we're going to have a surface interval of 1 hour and 10 minutes, and this will put us in pressure group. Dive number 2, we're going to dive to a depth of 16 meters for 30 minutes. So here we need to add the residual nitrogen, the actual dive time, to get our total dive time. Total dive time is, so at the end of dive 2, our pressure group is, good luck with that question. It's a fairly simple, straightforward dive plan, and I'll give you the answers to these pressure groups at the end of this video. I hope you found that useful and easy to follow. Like I said, this is just an introduction to the RDP tables, and your dive instructor will go through this in more detail with you. I mentioned right at the beginning that there's other useful information on the RDP tables. I'll show you some of this information now. You'll notice on the first page of the RDP, there are some greyed out boxes. This means there is a safety stop required. Your safety stop is at the end of the dive at 5 meters for 3 minutes. This just helps reduce the amount of nitrogen in your system. You'll also see some black boxes. These are your no decompression limits. This is the maximum amount of time you can stay underwater for that given depth. As a newly qualified open water diver at 18 meters, that's 56 minutes. On the other side of the RDP, on page 2, it's worth looking at the information at the bottom. There's further information on safety stops, emergency decompression, flying after diving, diving at altitude. There are special rules for multiple dives depending on the pressure group that you finish at. And there are some general rules, including safe ascent rate, cold water diving. And finally, always remember, dive within your training and experience levels and never exceed the limits on this planner. Wherever possible, try not to dive to those maximum limits. So that's the end of our first how-to video. If you've made it this far and you've watched the video all the way through, thank you very much. Please consider subscribing and ringing the bell. And if you've got any feedback, any questions, any comments, please leave them down below. And if there's a particular how-to video that you want us to do, leave a message below and we'll have a look at it. The answers to the practice question we set a moment ago are coming up now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.